it's my party, and I'll play all of Halo 1's campaign on Legendary if I want to. Halo is one of the most popular FPS games ever, and outside of like Doom, it's one of the few FPS games that doesn't look the same as every other one nowadays. Halo kinda made a ton of important advancements for the FPS genre as a whole, but the main thing it did that's important right now is its choice to mix party game elements into a genre that was a bit stale at the time. So how exactly did they do this? I don't know, but I can take a guess. First off, let's deal with that lame semi-realism most FPS games have had so far by leaving the boring normal guns behind and giving us some very unrealistic alien weaponry on top of the normal boring guns. Next, simplify a lot of the most complicated aspects of FPS titles so that everything is easier to pick up and play with. No! You know, overall, everything was just a tad more of lighthearted fun than other FPS titles. Power-ups, co-op, floaty physics, vehicle sections, that's a big one I think. There's even tons of customizability in lobbies, including what weapons and vehicles appear. Later entries in the series even gave you the Forge mode to literally create your own map, and the Steam releases have official modding support to give you even more tools to mess with. A lot of people have raised issue with modern Halo games ever since the series changed hands from Bungie to 343 Industries, starting with Halo 4. And I'll admit, I haven't played 4 nor 5, and honestly couldn't be bothered because it's not really relevant here, because regardless of what 4 or 5 are like, 6, which is Halo Infinite, is the most recent iteration of the series, and in comparison to the old Halo games, it still has a lot of that party game feel.
Get out of my face, I have more important— ow!
Like the ability to throw power cells around and the new power-ups like the grappling hook are loads of party game-esque fun. But ultimately, the narrative you always hear is that the newer games don't capture the same magic as the older ones. Halo Infinite has gone through a lot of changes recently, and now people generally like it, but at launch it was grouped in with the bad Halo games of 4 and 5. And the main reason I kept hearing about was that people felt that modern 343 Halo games were just chasing popular FPS trends, while the old Bungie Halo games set those popular FPS trends. And I don't think that's true. Instead, if I may be so bold, I think the difference between old and new Halo was an increased focus on competitive viability over dumb fun. This idea has been, and kinda still is, dominating a lot of games. With the rise of things like esports and the general idea of taking competitive video games more seriously, game designers noticed the incredible potential of an untapped market that is quite sizable and rapidly approaching your location. However, there's a problem with focusing exclusively on competitive play for your game. It doesn't work. Aiming for the esports market when making a video game is a devil's temptation only fools would befall. There's a lot of money to be made in esports and a large crowd that goes mostly unpandered to, but look at it this way. Focusing really hard on a very small and specific crowd will almost guarantee that you secure that audience. But if that group you're targeting is the top 1% of players who have already dedicated their life to your game enough to become esports competitors, then you aren't going to have a very popular game. You've essentially isolated 99% of your potential audience just to hyperfixate on the 1% who were already so addicted to your game that they probably would have stayed around anyway. I wouldn't dare suggest that Overwatch was ever geared towards casual play per se, but they are certainly the prime example of what happens if you push way too much for a hardcore competitive audience. I think the main issue that most game developers had is that they didn't realize that sports weren't initially invented just to be sports. When the cavemen kicked a black and white ball into a cave to invent football, they didn't immediately organize a FIFA World Cup to celebrate. No, people just played soccer for a while. You know, like a game. And it was an inherently fun game, so people played it all the time. And when people do something a lot, they get good at doing it. And when people get good at doing something, they want to prove how good they are. And when people want to prove how good they are, they start competing. So the game had to be fun first to become competitive. And sometimes people change the rules as something becomes more competitive. But if the official FIFA World Cup rule set isn't fun for you when you're just casually playing with friends, you don't have to follow those rules.
Look, I'm moving.
How'd you win that one?
I don't know.
The universe will not stop you from using your hands in football. The problem with esports-focused games is that you can't. You can't change the rules if the developer doesn't let you. And if the developer has made their game specifically only to focus on competitive play, then you can't change it to be more casual. You can add as many custom rules as you want to a video game, but you can't take any away. So in that way, developers need to make their game allow for the widest options possible. I'd even go so far to say that you probably don't even need to think about esports at all when designing a game. If a game is fun, people will make it competitive. It doesn't matter if they end up restricting 90% of the content to do it. The fact that competitive Smash seems so crushingly restrictive and boring to me doesn't matter because I still love playing Smash since I have all the options for all the fun I want. And on the other end of the spectrum, there's some options in Smash that I don't think would be fun to use outside of trying it once or twice. You know, I've never cared for the spirit system in the game because I just don't want to think that much. But thankfully, I don't have to. It's an option for a reason. But Halo, right? I started this discussion with Halo, and I kinda suggested recent Halo games have been focusing on competitive play too much, but even at launch, Halo Infinite had a lot of customizability in lobbies and even a Forge mode, though it was apparently not great. So it's not like casual play was impossible.
Please don't.
Oh, I see.
I took your fucking car, no.
And for that matter, Overwatch 2 had customizable lobbies and game modes, so they should feel fun and casual if you want them to be. Having external methods to make a game more casual fun is great and all, but it won't fully fix a game that's core design is focused on purely competitive gameplay. I have a feeling you're gonna get me, like, nearly immediately.
Nah.
Yep.
And I think that the most simple example of this is randomness. Competitive games see randomness as something to avoid, and that makes sense. Randomness in games where you compete against others is only really there to give less skilled players a chance to win, so if you're trying to be an esport where the whole point is that the most skilled player wins, removing randomness makes sense. But if every single match was the same with no variation, then that wouldn't be very enjoyable. Mario Kart can be played with items off, but even in professional Mario Kart tournaments, the items remain on, because otherwise it'd be the most boring game in history. But hyper-competitive games will avoid randomness at all cost. A game with no randomness can still be fun if there's enough variety, but oftentimes there won't be. If the game is competitive, then the players will take it competitively and find what works best and stick to it. There's not really a reason to ever try something differently if nothing else about the game ever changes. Outside of balance patches, I guess. But as I said, obviously randomness isn't the only way to make a game fun, it's just an easy example. I mean, Halo, the game we're kind of focusing on with all this, doesn't even have any randomness, and I'd still say it's fun, for sure.
That was... What? No, stop jumping over it.
But my point is, if the whole game is designed to heavily favor competitive play, then it doesn't matter if there's 4 fun modes, because the core design still makes it so you have to treat it competitively. For example, in League of Legends, some characters are absolutely terrible at a low level of play, but incredibly strong at a higher level. So even when you're playing a casual mode, those characters will never be viable for you to play because... Wait. No, actually, I mean, it is a problem that characters are balanced more around competitive play than actual fun, but the main issue is that the design of the game makes casual players feel like they need to care about balance. These games are so obviously centered around their esports scene that just simply playing them is seen as you trying to get good competitively rather than being seen as just playing a game. I don't care if I suck at playing Sombra and that she's been nerfed into the ground. I'm not playing ranked matches and she's fun, so it shouldn't matter. But Overwatch is an esport, so it doesn't matter if I'm here for fun because, this is a real quote mind you, you can't be here just to have fun. This is a competitive game. If you want to just mess around the whole time, go play a different game. Okay, that wasn't actually a real quote, but we can all agree it easily could have been. The point is, the perception of how seriously you should take a game can be the deciding factor between whether a game is fun to play casually or not. See ya.
What's happening, man?
Drove off a cliff.
This isn't even exclusive to competitively designed games, and since we've already been talking about cringe League of Legends and cringe Overwatch, let's use the example of cringe Genshin Impact. Genshin, a game that's most certainly not supposed to be competitive since you literally can't compete against other players, has this huge perception that you need to farm for the perfect equipment and construct the perfect team comps. Its freeform systems, like the artifacts, stopped being a mechanic where you can have fun slapping together what you think might be best for your team based on what you happened to get, and instead became, wait for the guide to tell you what to grind for. The same thing happened with League of Legends and its rune system and its item shop, and I'm by no means saying this is the fault of the players and community exclusively. The fact that people perceive a game competitively is entirely because that's how the game is made. I mean, there's no reason that people would just randomly decide to start taking Halo seriously.
I stole it from you.
How dare you?
Microsoft and 343 started taking Halo seriously. It was the mascot of Xbox, the big mature focused system. The idea that the main game of Xbox was a party game would be ridiculous, because if they wanted to do that, they'd just revive Fusion Frenzy and I'd be a happier person. But Halo started getting advertised as this typical, super serious, mature shooter, so people started seeing it that way. To go back to the earlier examples, when Genshin Impact players had gotten through all of the one-time content, the only repeatable, regularly updated content that they were given was the Spiral Abyss, a super difficult series of encounters with the toughest enemies designed to test if your team of characters is truly amazing. So obviously all of the core players of Genshin started to care a lot about how strong their teams were. In League of Legends' case, the developers started pushing their esports really hard with massive cinematics and official tournaments, and gave players almost nothing else for content. All of the main publicity of League was built around its competitive scene. They even gave you the Clash mode, which was designed to mimic how esports tournaments worked by forcing you to stick with the same team of 5 players for a full competitive season. So, of course people think that's all that matters. And in both of these games, where their fun freeform systems ended up being more of a correct choice, like artifacts or runes, their solution to it was not to change how it worked so that people felt like they could mess with it more. It was to just tell you what the correct choice is in-game so you don't have to go to an external site to find it. This is what's changed with modern Halo games. There isn't some magic difference in design between how Smash Bros handles its competitiveness versus how League or Overwatch do, and there's no big change of design between the first Halo and the newest one. The biggest difference is that when I'm playing Smash Bros, people know it's just the dumb Nintendo game, and if I want to take it more seriously, then I can, but nobody expects me to. But if I'm playing an esport-ready game, then people expect me to be ready to compete in said esport. So Halo just needs to stop taking itself so seriously. It's supposed to be a dumb fun party game. Stop making everybody think it's the big competitive SPS. You've already got Gears of War. You don't need to make Halo that too.
What? No!
Impossible!